Taehyung feels alienated not because of physical distance, nor because of conflicts that can be easily pointed to and explained. The feeling came slowly, almost imperceptibly, like cold air that infiltrated between the silence. In the midst of the spotlight that continues to follow their every step, small changes in the dynamics of the relationship are precisely the ones that shake the most. And it was at this point that the question began to arise. What exactly was Jungkook doing so that Taehyung felt an unfamiliar space between the once so familiar closeness? In recent times, sensitive hobbyists have caught subtle cues. Taehyung's gaze is more often empty, a smile that remains beautiful but feels like holding something back, and body language that seems to be looking but not finding. He does not complain, does not hint at anything openly. But precisely because Taehyung is known to be honest through expression and work, the slightest change feels like an unfinished sentence. There's a sense of longing for something that is still there, but no longer feels the same. Jungkook, on the other hand, looks to be taking a different step. He becomes more closed, more immersed in his own world. Not away roughly, but away in a quiet way, in togetherness. There are moments where he is physically present, but his mind is like being somewhere else. To outsiders, this may seem a trifle, but for Taehyung, someone accustomed to reading feelings from the smallest detail, these changes felt real. When someone who used to always be there suddenly becomes silent, an empty space is created. Feelings of alienation are often not the result of one big event, but rather the accumulation of unspoken little things. Jungkook probably didn't mean to leave or hurt. It could be that he is struggling with a burden that he does not share, choosing to carry it alone in the belief that silence is the best way. But silence, without realizing it, can create distance. And the distance, for those who are used to walking side by side, feels like a loss of direction. Taehyung is known to be intuitive, emotional, and empathetic. He perceives change not as an accusation, but rather as anxiety. There are questions that may never be asked. Am I still needed the way I used to be? Am I still being seen? This kind of question is not always born of the ego, but rather of a deep bond. When that bond feels loosened, the feeling of isolation arises not because of lack of love, but because of love that cares too much. What exactly did Jungkook do? Perhaps not doing in the active sense, but rather withdrawing in the passive sense. There are phases in a person's life when the focus shifts inward, seeking balance, reconstituting identity, or simply surviving. Jungkook, who grew up under tremendous pressure from a young age, may now be in that phase. A phase in which the energy to explain is exhausted, and the only option is silence. But the silence, without realizing it, becomes a language that is difficult for the closest people to understand. What makes this situation feel touching is the fact that there is no sign of hostility. No open conflict, no loud words. There are only two individuals who both carry the burden in different ways. Taehyung processes feelings by feeling and expressing, while Jungkook chooses to shut down and save. When these two ways meet without a communication bridge, a sense of alienation grows in the space between them. For fans, this situation gave rise to mixed emotions. There is concern, there is a desire to protect, and there is hope that the two will rediscover the same rhythm. But it's important to remember that every relationship, even the strongest, goes through a silent phase. A phase in which distance is not a sign of the end, but rather a sign of change. And change, while painful, is often necessary to grow. Taehyung feels alienated not because he is abandoned, but because he is standing on the threshold of a new understanding. He feels a small loss of something once familiar, while learning to accept that the people he cares about also have the right to change. Jungkook, in his own way, is probably learning the same thing. That withdrawing is not a long-term solution, and that silence, if left unchecked, can be misinterpreted that in the end, this story is not about who is wrong or right. It is the story of two human beings who grew up under the same light, but walked with steps that were once misaligned. The sense of alienation Taehyung feels is not the end of the bond, but rather a signal that there is something that needs to be understood, bridged, and perhaps, in time, talked about. And like so many things in their lives, the answer may not come through direct words, but through time, maturity, and honesty that slowly finds its way. That silence, for Taehyung, was no ordinary pause. It feels like too long a night, where the mind walks alone without a clear direction. In the togetherness that remains, he feels the difference in rhythm. The steps that used to be in the same rhythm now sound a little behind. Not because Jungkook stepped faster, but because the direction of their gaze had not met. Taehyung, accustomed to capturing the presence of small vibrations, perceives the emptiness as something tangible, albeit intangible. There are days when Taehyung chooses to stay quiet longer, not because he doesn't want to share, but because he himself is trying to understand his feelings. He did not want to conclude too quickly, did not want to turn confusion into accusations. But feelings, if they continue to be suppressed, have their own way of appearing, through a floating gaze, through a restrained smile, through a pause before words come out. To people who knew him, all of that spoke louder than any statement. Jungkook, on the other hand, seemed increasingly focused inward. He arranges his world carefully, as if every thought needs to be tidied up before it is shared. There was a fear he might not admit, that if he opened himself too wide, the burden would increase. So he chose silence, not as rejection, but as protection. But too close protection can make the closest people feel no longer invited in. Relationships built over the years are often tested not by big storms, but by small, constantly blowing winds. Taehyung felt it. He recalls the times when togetherness seemed effortless, when laughter flowed without pause. Now, togetherness still exists, but it requires more awareness. Awareness to be present, to hear, to ask even though the answer may not come immediately. In his silence, Taehyung learned one important thing, that feeling alienated doesn't always mean losing love. Sometimes it is a sign that love is changing shape, from boisterous to calm, from spontaneous to thoughtful. This change requires courage, the courage to wait without prejudice, and the courage to open the conversation when the time feels right. For fans, the story often reads as an emotional puzzle. But behind the speculation, there's a simple fact that is often forgotten. They are people. Humans are growing, tired, looking for meaning, and sometimes lost for a moment. Taehyung feels alienation not as an end, but as an invitation to understand more deeply about himself, about Jungkook, and about the relationship they maintain amid a world that never stops demanding. Time has its own way of tidying up crumpled things. In small pauses, there will probably be a moment when silence turns into a frank conversation. Not a dramatic conversation, but rather a simple one, about being tired, about being afraid, about hope. And that's where seemingly unfamiliar distances can begin to find their way back. If Taehyung feels isolated today, it's not because he's alone. That's because he is sensitive enough to feel the change before others notice it. And if Jungkook seems distant, it's not because he doesn't care, but because he's learning a new way to survive. Between these two processes, there's a space waiting to be bridged with patience, empathy, and courage to get back closer to each other, step by step.